Welcome to
Unfiltered Growth.
Real Talk on Trends and Strategies. This podcast is your weekly dose of reality-checked wisdom.
As we explore the intersection of entrepreneurship, marketing, culture, business, and innovation.
We strip away the BS and dive into real challenges and opportunities for revenue growth.
With a sharp, unfiltered lens.
Expect raw conversations, real success,
and failure stories,
and practical advice that you can apply to your journey.
No filters,
just growth.
We are on another episode of Unfiltered Growth. And you know what's about to be really fun, Christina? We got Strategy Hacker. We got the Martech Barbie. And we got the Impact Influencer in the house. Ow! Jimmy Newson. How are you doing, brother?
I am doing fantabulous. It is all good in the hood.
You're always so suave and chill. I feel like I look to a radio host just be like, you know,
many years of practice. I spent 30 years hosting events, weddings, bar and bat mitzvahs, sweet 16s. So you cultivate that voice and you can't turn it off.
The things you find out by giving someone a mic and just say talk.
Yeah, and believe me, that first day was not a good day. It went down in flames. I mean, it was bad. But with practice comes perfection.
I love that. Jimmy, you know, I was thinking with me and Christina, we're, launching this podcast. We're pushing the envelope on this thing. And you also have a podcast coming and driving Impact All of Us. Could you want to talk about that? But on top of that, what the premise of the show is, what are the challenges and the impact you're trying to do with that podcast?
Sure. So our podcast is called the Impact Us All podcast. And, for us business owners that want to get into podcasting, I think usually the hardest part is the topic and the format. And it took me 2.5, 3 years, because, I do a lot of speaking around the world and everyone's like, why do you not have a podcast yet? And I'm like, I have to find the it. And that's the North Star. And even when we dive into strategy, things like that, if you don't have a North Star, nothing else matters. And that's my personal opinion. And I think and I'm not really a woo person, but when the timing's right, the timing's right. And the timing just happened to be right when I finally realized what is it that I'm trying to do in this world. I hear a lot from my clients, the impact I've had on them, which is how I ended up being named the Impact Influencer, not because I'm an Instagram star, because I help businesses with impact. I help them figure out, well, how do we make the impact? How do we, and at the same time, contribute to our bottom line? And that's when I said, that's a topic that every business owner can get behind. The problem I see with small businesses is they don't realize, even as small as they are, they can still make a massive impact. Everybody looks up to somebody, which means somebody is looking up to you. You are impacting people. And so with that, the Impact podcast, the Impact Us All podcast was born, where the theme is impact strategies for small businesses from the minds of big businesses that care, and then of course that's integrated with amazing entrepreneurs like yourself, who is also a guest on the show. And it's something that, people are really excited about because I don't typically do a lot of big level thinking. I like to get into the nitty gritty and go, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. When we talk about impact, it's really more of a long-term strategy, which means you won't see results tomorrow. You're going to see results are going to build over time.
I love that. What's your thoughts, CK?
That's so good. And I love that you talked about like being the impact influencer, and not in the sense of like you're doing TikTok dances and influencing that way. I mean, you can. I mean, let's go. But it's because I feel like, well, especially for small businesses, you can impact them in different stages that they're in. And those impacts build to be a even bigger impact, and you be part of that story. So with that, are you thinking of a client now that you've kind of worked with throughout their journey of getting bigger and impacting them in different ways or different approaches, what have you done differently to increase the impact? Because sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've done this over and over with them and it's not going to like change. Maybe you'll have some impact, but those like growth impacts. What have you done to really move the needle with a client that you've worked with for like the longest time?
Yeah, great question. And really it goes back to we're just facilitators. So at the end of the day, I have to help you figure out what is it that you really want to do? What do you consider impact? And what, and whether that's on a local level, regional level, national level, or global level, and help you see in you the impact one you're probably already having that you're not tapping into, that you're not leveraging to get more exposure, to build better partnerships and relationships. And once that's there, now we go, well, how does that contribute to the overall vision of the organization? So when they're able to start really thinking that way, then it changes their whole mindset. Where I remember one of my mentors shared with me. He was on an elevator. He goes and he asked a young lady next to him, what did she do? And he kind of sheepishly said, well, I sell insurance. And he goes, well, what does that do for the people? And she goes, oh, and then she lit up and she was like, well, it gives them security. They know that people are taken care of. They can go to sleep. I go, so what do you really do? How do you really impact people? And that's when she was like, oh, I go, so it's never about the action. Sometimes it's about the feeling, what people get from that. So when I can help people, my clients understand that it doesn't matter what you do for a living, you are always impacting people. That's the message you should be leading with. And that's where people can start to feel more connected to you. So that's what I like to try to help my clients do, is see that big picture. And then it changes how we move forward together to help them grow.
I love that. And I feel too, and this is called unfiltered growth. So I'm going to get real quick. But it sounds like you're like pouring into their cup per se and giving a lot. So what do you do to get your cup refilled to help your impact be influenced even for yourself?
Well, you got some great questions, girl.
Christina's the best in the game.
You better stop. So for me, it's really just having conversations. I can have a really bad day or a start of a bad day. The moment I start talking to a business owner or talking to a partner, I get re-energized. And so sometimes I'll purposely sabotage my bad vision at the moment, I don't have it, or I'm trying to find the word, but I'm in a funk, and I'll purposely get on a call. And every time I do, I feel much better. I'm energized. I'm excited. And it reminds me of what I'm doing. Why am I here? So these are things that you can do to get yourself out of a funk as a business owner, because we get into it. People tend to want to sell you all the greatness of small business ownership and entrepreneurship, and tend to forget to tell you about the things that come along with it that are pretty much 50% of being a small business owner and an entrepreneur. So you have to set up ways of, how do I stay positive? How do I stay focused? And for me, again, it's I'll and I can feel it when I'm like, oh, I'm not there today. And I get on a call and I'm just like, at the end, I'm like, like I just drank 300 cups of coffee and I'm ready to go. So that helps me, is really talking to them, because when they start talking about issues and then you can help them, it energizes you. It energizes me.
Yes. And that's, and I feel like that also connects with what you were talking about with like connection and community within small businesses, because you're connecting with your community to help you as well. Because you're almost like practice what you're preaching, especially if someone who's starting a small business, they're reading things and they're seeing things and they're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to digest. But that you're practicing what you preach is super important, that you create that trust factor with your potential clients or your current clients. So that's super important.
Absolutely. And that's the thing when you say, we have to practice what we preach. That old saying has always, it's been, the cobbler has the worst shoes. And I go, that's no longer an excuse. We cannot use that. If you build websites for other people, your website can't look like crap. And I just had that out with a client about somebody that built their site, and I was just like, I'm sorry, no. I'm like, I had to level my game up when I looked at what we're doing. If we're teaching it, we need to be doing it.
Yes. Troy's probably knows where I'm going with this statement, but it's the same thing when people are talking about like their values and the mission of their company. When I see a company saying our values, 1 second, my dogs are fighting, so pause. Y'all, stop it.
The reality
look at me like, I didn't do nothing. I did nothing.
We keep it in. The reality of entrepreneurship, y'all.
They're like, of course, they've been sleeping all freaking morning, and now they're like, let's.
They heard Jimmy's voice, and it was like, yeah, tell them the truth.
Let's do it.
Exactly. Goodness. Okay. Okay. Troy's going to know exactly what I'm talking about right now because I send him URLs all the time on this, especially when it comes to companies saying their values and their mission and the imagery they're using. For instance, for example, I'm not going to call out this company, but they were saying one of their values is like DEIB. And all of the photos on their diversity page were stock imagery of it was like a Black woman at a computer and white men around her pointing at her screen. I'm like,
that doesn't look. That's not a good look.
That's not that. No. And then it's like people high-fiving, and it's not like, this is no. And so when it comes to even the imagery and how you are portraying that, people care about that, especially if it's one you're trying to recruit talent or prospects. Like when I look at tech that I want to use, that we want to use, I look at their values and things like that. And if you're not portraying the truth on your website and I go to LinkedIn and see it's completely different, that needs to change.
Absolutely. I'm a big component of values. And that took me a long time to wrap my head around. It was probably the one thing that I struggled with most until one of my advisors really pointed out, that's not your value. That's your value. And then he explained, I was just like, oh, okay. And then it becomes a strong attraction magnet for the people. Like you said, you're looking at the values because you're trying to find the connection between you and them. And when they live it and you know it, you feel more comfortable. We need more transparency. These older organizations that want to still operate like it's 1998, it's not. You have to, regardless of if the younger generation is your target audience or not, it doesn't matter, because eventually they will be, because they do get older. Last time I checked, we don't go backwards, we go forward.
We're not Benjamin Button, y'all. No.
When I'm hearing what everyone's saying, and if I'm reflecting on what small businesses, emerging brands, growing entrepreneurs, and they're listening or watching to this, they're hearing, okay, yeah, I got to upgrade my values. My website ain't what it needs to be yet, and all these things. And I'm going to go around the room and we're going to spotlight it, because again, at the beginning of this episode, I highlighted our monikers, if you will. And I think there's depth to that people may not realize. And especially for minorities and underrepresented communities, sometimes you do put on that, okay, I'm this person when I'm the impact influencer, when I'm the MarTech barber, when I'm the strategy hacker, I'm that person. I'm her, I'm him, I'm them, right? And so I remember when I was trying to reset everything with my business, like my business was trash. Like no one was buying nothing. I'm over here like, yo, what's going on? Like no one's showing up. No one's even looking. And so I just destroyed the website, and I took some time. I know, Jimmy, we've had some conversations, and I was like, okay, I'm going to rebrand and sound this. I didn't have a website yet. I think I just got the LLC like 2 days ago, sent a proposal with the name on it, and got something closed. Now, I'm not saying a name by itself is going to help you close business, but maybe it will. But I think a small business need to consider, what am I trying to attract? What am I trying to implement? What am I trying to say? And so, Jim, you've already echoed a little bit about, how the name comes out. And I love that you said, it's not like I claimed that. It was like it was bestowed upon me. And I have enough track record of people validating he is what he's saying is with that name associated with you. But I would also say it's a curiosity piece. It's a
Oh yeah,
let me
absolutely.
see what you about piece. Could you talk a little bit about that? And then we're going to kind of go around and everyone kind of share, how did your origin story name come to be and why it impacted your business and yourself?
All right, so you want to have some fun. Okay.
Oh, we
So
Unfiltered, baby.
this is and again, and this is where, let's start with values. So the one thing that I finally realized, and of course, I learned from some incredible people and organizations, Cascade being one of them, which is a management tool for strategy. That when people start creating values, they start pulling things out of the air: respect, honesty, things like that. Boring, crap, and boring. Values are already exist in you. They're not something you have to go find. And when you can tap into, well, who am I already? How do I already think? What do I value? They're already there. They've been there for years, especially if you're an adult by now. So the question is, how does that relate to your business? And then that becomes the personality that not only that you shoot out to your potential customers, but everybody inside the organization also has to rally around that, And so when it came to my moniker, the impact influencer, this is where you as a business owner have to take your ego out. And a colleague of mine, because she rewrote my bio. This was probably in 2020, and based on that, she named me the profit producer. Okay. So I was like, wow, that's hot. That's dope. So I ran with that for about a year or so. And then I ran into, I had a conversation with a young lady I was introduced to that I think she worked at the time. I want to say she worked at Amazon, or she was, and she was like, after we had our introductory discovery call, I call them, just to get to know each other. She goes, listen, don't take this the wrong way. Whenever I hear that, I get this knot in my stomach. I'm like, oh God, what are they going to say? And she goes, the podcast producer, I mean, the podcast, the profit producer doesn't really fit you. And I'm like, all right. And I'm like, and I go, okay, that's not so bad. Why? And so I could have been defensive and go, no, well, this is, but at the end of the day, she's a very smart lady. So I should listen, if anything. So I listened to her, and she goes, you're more than that. She goes, one, profit is only a piece of the business. She goes, two, profit could also be religious. So now there's confusion if the person's never met you. And for me as a marketer, I'm an inbound marketer, but from heart, I'm a HubSpotter. I know you are too. And I'm not sure, Christine, if you're a HubSpotter, but I'm a HubSpotter.
She's an OG HubSpotter.
Okay,
trust.
there you go.
She's the one you need to talk to, not me.
All right, there you go. So, and at the end of the day, we learn, we gravitate to people that we've learned from, and we respect that. So she was like, you're much more than the profit producer, because it's too confusing. I hate cute in marketing. If anybody asks me, I don't like cute. Cute is confusion. And the saying is, confusing minds don't buy. So she goes, you influence people. You really get into them. No matter what the topic is, at the end result, you influence them. And so we brainstormed for 45 minutes with different words and combinations, and I let her lead. So I take myself out. When I had my other colleague write my bio, she goes, I'm going to write it, and you're going to approve, and then you're going to give me some change. I go, no, I'm not. I go, you're going to write it, and I'm going to accept it, because I need somebody who's looking at me. If I tell you who I am, that's great. But if you tell me what you think of me, that's better, at least in my perspective, because now it's like your marketing. You hire somebody, books you, or someone decides to use your service. You think they used your service because of your marketing and your tagline, this and that, and they're going, no, I booked you, or I hired you because of A, B, and C. That now becomes your language, because you want more of that person. So you have to listen. So that's how my moniker came about, is through me sitting back and letting smart people who are good at what they do analyze me and say, this is what I see when I see you. And now you just have to go, all right, do I agree with it? and what can I do with this information? And that's kind of long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, it was perfect. We needed the whole story, CK, about you and the Martech Barbie. I think my issue always was I hated to be limited in what I could do. And once I broke out of social media marketing, it was like too much work, underpaid, very limited. I thought, well, how do I break out of this? But also, this is the problem, y'all, when you listen to the people who ain't know nothing about what you're trying to do in business, but they bestowed upon you a name. And just because my handle, Fine Troy, was so ooh, and even to this day, everywhere I go, I was like, oh my, it's kind of like Justin Timberlake with "It's Gonna Be May." Like everywhere I go, everyone's like, I found Troy. And I'm like, like it was cool like 10 years ago. Now it's kind of like, okay, y'all like I'm the Black Waldo or something. Like, but anyway, I digress. I think people weren't taking me serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other component was when I wasn't doing social and I'm trying to do other things. Well, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And so, again, people think you were born, you just knew exactly what you want to do in the terms. No, I never knew. And I was like, Troy, you're always thinking, you're always all this place. You're really good at just strategy, period. It doesn't matter, what type of what it is. You just can come to a table and start visualizing what can be done. And I was like, oh, so, and I was like a kid that just was like, that's the word. That's me. Okay. What's wrong with it? So then you go through the whole domain thing and checker thing. And Christina, we do this all the time. How do we tie it in and whatever? And I thought the hacker part was interesting. And sure, if they don't know you, to your point, Jimmy, like you said earlier about the profit producer, it can convey like, okay, like hacker, like what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to do? What's going on? But I think the connotation of figuring out back routes for businesses who maybe couldn't do it before, or how intensive I can go trying to figure those things out. And also, there has to be some element of curiosity and be like, oh, I never thought those two words would go together very well. And it's like, And I think, I think there's power in it. I think it's registered now, like official, like y'all can't take it. It's fully registered all the way through. But I think once I had that as a smaller business trying to find himself, it gave me the opportunity in the room to be like, no matter what's going on, when this thing hits record and I'm on the stage or I'm in front of someone else, I'm this person. They got it together. They're calm, they're collected, they're confident, they're curious. It doesn't matter. They're unwavering. And I think it meant more to me because now I had a place to put that identity just to kind of navigate any unconscious bias, implicit bias, imposter syndrome you may have. And I think brands, I'm not saying, okay, we name certain things as our moniker. That don't mean it's the name of our business. Let me make it be clear. Not everybody should name their moniker as their business. You will be laughed out when you're trying to work with corporate brands. And we all on this conversation know how that works. It's enough curiosity, but ain't too much to be like, you got some misspelled words, you got some numbers. I ain't trying to do my people wrong. I'm just saying, like, sometimes you got to come a certain way to get the certain bags. We're just going to leave it at that. Christina, your thoughts on your moniker and your origin story?
Yeah. So I have used MarTech in almost every part of my career. And it really started with HubSpot in 2009. And really growing within my career from using, I guess you would start with like Cision and like Vocus technically, because I was like PR days. But then it got into different industries I was working in, working with different marketing automation platforms, different CRMs. And so then really being able to use my different hats and how Barbie has different occupations and she can vibe into whatever she wants to do. That's kind of my thinking when it comes to MarTech and integrations and the cross-functional relationships of departments. And so that's what came about of MarTech Barbie. And yes, it helps I'm blonde and I love pink. So, it really goes well together. Yeah. So when people read it, they're probably, when people think of like MarTech, most likely they have to be in the marketing, sales, business world to know what MarTech is. Otherwise, they might think it's something with like hospitals or in that world, like pharmacy or something like that. I feel if you see the word and not know what it is. But what really came about for me is owning what I do and really being proud of what I do, and then creating a community around that, which I feel, and I don't mean to get real like woo woo over here, but what but what like Barbie does, Barbie gives it's usually, when I was growing up, targeted at girls, but it can be boys or girls playing with dolls essentially, and it's making that imagination come to life and kind of putting that within my career. Because when I'm talking to sales teams, CS teams, marketing teams, a lot of the times it is those goals they have and they think they're so far-fetched and so whatever, but I create this little magic wand that I have per se that creates that like API, that automation that increases their sales activities and decreases the things that are manual, which is what like Barbie, in the sense, if you think about it, is that magical, mythical person that can conquer all in whatever outfit, in whatever occupation she's in, to really piece that community together. And which is what MarTech Barbie kind of came about from that.
My takeaways from both of you, not to get woo woo, but we're doing something up in here. There's a flow here. I think for you, Christina, as a proud business partner, co-host, and ally, another thing is most people, when they think of MarTech, they don't think of a woman as a leader in that. And I think that's your way of claiming that. But also, like, like you said, it ain't boring. It got some swagger to it. You can be glamorous and making money, right? We can do glam and growth. That should be a whole segment. We'll talk about that later. And I think for you, Jimmy, you know how I feel about you, Jimmy. Like, you're like my older brother at this point, a mentor. I think as the impact influencer, again, growing up and going into this industry, I ain't seen a lot of us like leading the way, being on those stages, having the type of logos that will say, I have audience with this person. Mm-hmm. They can have a conversation and get headway because of their stance and their presence. And we all know, as underrepresented communities in here, as former small business and navigating, trying to grow in our own individual and collective challenges, how hard that is to do that. And I think you both are doing it very gracefully. And I can't say certain things. I know certain tea, and I'm just like, it's unfiltered, but that's like that's too much time in the tea. But I commend you both for giving back and helping those coming behind you figuring out their way and their path. And I don't think that's talked about enough. We just come up here and we just turn on, switch on. We are monikers. But then when the lights are on, when the remotes, or everything's turned off, we have our own challenges and everything going on. With that being said, I think Jimmy, how important is community for growth and collaboration for growth?
Well, let me start by saying I'm all about partnerships all day, every day. And as a small business, I do say this a lot on stage and in private with my colleagues, associates, what have you, that, sometimes we tend to not realize what's in our own backyard. There's a strategy that I use a lot with a lot of businesses, whether it's in the classroom settings, things like that. And I have them take out a piece of paper and I have them write down every single person that has interacted with their business, from their mother to their cousin to the Fiverr freelancer. And then I have them categorize them. I go, because now that you can categorize them, now not that you're using them, but you know how to leverage the relationship better. Is there an opportunity to build a community around that? Maybe a specific subset of that list of people. and so you now can get them, it benefits the relationship. So, if I can use you better or leverage you better, you should win just as much as I should win, because now we're not wasting each other's time, and we can respect each other's opinion a lot more, because we understand, well, what are you bringing to the table for this organization? What am I bringing to the table for this organization? So we start there by understanding who's in our backyard, and then we can kind of see, well, who do we want to add to this? How can we build on this community? Because people come to join things because of other people that are already there. So if you leverage that, no one wants to necessarily, unfortunately, be the first, unless they're just the innovators like us, the crazy ones that are like, yeah, I'll be the first one. But most people are not like that. They want to go, well, who else is there? Who's going to be there? And when you can be clear on the type of people and the type of interaction that they may have, not that you can predict what will happen, then they're intrigued to want to go. They're intrigued to want to be a part of it. So community, relationships are pretty much the highest. They come actually second, as far as I'm concerned, to customer service. Okay, but I have a saying. I go, you both have heard the money's in the list, but I say the new currency is community. With the disappearance of the third-party cookie, with all the changes in how we reach people through advertising and all that, we have to do a better job at first-party data and zero-party data, and you get that through building a community.
I feel that's one of the positive things to come out of COVID is people's realization that community and connection matters, and that you are able to do it virtually in a way, and obviously in real life. But some things like this wouldn't happen without virtual connection, and you are able to create that empathetic, authentic connection digitally, but you have to have that, I don't want to say like swagger, but you have to have the unfilteredness of yourself to give that customer service and not a templated way, because they want that human connection. Otherwise, they will go to another consultant. They will go to another tech provider, because there are a lot of options. And the reason why people will stay is because of the community and the customer service that you're providing, whatever your service, your tech is. And that's, to go back to like HubSpot, that's one of the reasons why I've connected with HubSpot for so long. I've used other technologies in that space, like Marketo, Pardot, Active Campaign, like all of those. But where I felt I connected the most and could build myself and also help build others was within that tech community. And that's so important when you have, I'm extremely extroverted, and I also am, like you said, I'm crazy, like all of you guys are. Not maybe listening, but right here in the video. And want to be change makers and also help people make change as well.
Well, I think everybody is a little crazy. They trying to dive into entrepreneurship and be a change maker, because it is not for the faint of heart in any way, shape, or form. But to both of your points, what's screaming out to me, the impact of a first impression. I think a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs don't do a good enough job of making their first impression last. And what's crazy is, when you're doing first impressions, sometimes you're so focused on who you're directly talking to, you're missing on all the other people who are observing you from the far. Those shadow opportunities that we may not be aware of as of yet, but we made a first impression. Let's go back to the first time all three of us went on a stage and talked for the first time. We might have been focusing on so many other things, but when you get one or two people waiting for you after you get done on stage, and they want to talk to you and talk about how well your first, don't tell me that don't hit differently Don't tell me that doesn't reaffirm all the nerves and all the pressure and all everything. Jimmy, you're a master at this. How do you, one, if you would care to share a story about, any first impressions you might have made with brands and things you have worked with, because you've worked with quite a few. But then two, how do you coach or advise brands and businesses, entrepreneurs, how to make a good first impression?
Okay, so this one's going to be a little tougher because it's always based on the individual and their level of experience. I have clients that love to talk. I have clients that are afraid to talk. And if it's Christina, you're an extrovert. I am an introvert. People would never ever realize how much I absolutely despise networking. I can't stand walking into a room, which is why I forced myself to be on stage. So that was a strategic move. I go, if when people invite me to events, I am very protective of my time now. You can very seldom ever get me to go anywhere because every hour of the day, every minute of my day is already planned. So in order for me to move it, there needs to be a reason. And it needs to be strategic, and I talk to, and a lot of my business owners, they don't really like to hear that too much. I go, but when you start getting pretty busy, all of a sudden you're going to have to start making tough decisions. I can't go here. I can't do that. And people won't understand and they won't like it and they'll be mad at you. And at the end of the day, I don't want to sound mean, but I don't care. I have a big picture and my big picture is always about helping people. So that's how I sleep at night. So, I kind of lost my train of thought here for a second. Tell me what was I saying?
You were sharing. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think on that, and maybe this might help trigger it, is you, with what you said, a lot of me included, I need to do this better, but is creating those like boundaries when you're creating your schedule, saying, hey, this is, and it has to be a real good reason for you to move that around, is you knowing in your own personal growth and the impact influence you had on yourself is those personal work boundaries that you created. And teaching someone that is hard because someone will put a boundary up saying, oh no, like I'm fine. But knowing to create those time boundaries is super important. And I feel like that's a lesson in itself that you provide. And even just on this podcast as well.
Yeah. And I know where I was going here. And so when it comes to, being able to speak on stage and talk about these things, I put myself in that position because I then when I come off, yes, that energy, then the people, it is inbound marketing at its best. So only the people that resonate with you are the ones that are going to come talk to you. And and because you had that very specific conversation, you now know the entry point to the relationship. You know how to, you're both already on the same wavelength. And as long as you stay there, you're going to deepen the connection. You can start to expand later on the other things you can do. I think the one thing I try to talk to the business owners about is don't try to tell everybody everything you do. Stick to the reason why you're having the conversation in the first place. Just like reading a blog post. If I go to a blog article and then on T-shirts, and then your call to action is on pants, well, you kind of lost me. It's still apparel, but if I showed you my collection of T-shirts, now they're going to continue going down the rabbit hole. We tend to sabotage ourselves by going, oh, by the way, I can do this for you and I can do that. No, stick to why you're talking to them. Tell me more about that problem you're having. Let's see if we can solve that. How important is it for you to get out of that pain? So important. Great. Let's have a conversation. Lock it in, build the relationship, and then the next best thing you can hear from them is, so what else do you do? Right. I'm glad you asked.
I want to hold on to that moment in this mode because what people don't realize, and I will not speak for anyone else, I've been guilty of it, is that you lose your power when people are lost and you start just showing everything in the kitchen sink, especially if they didn't ask for it, because now you've relinquished where you're at. You let go of the high ground. Now they're like, oh, okay, all right. And again, I'm just gonna speak for me. and from my own experience, many times, if you're a growing entrepreneur, especially if you're in the minority, we have the tendency to want to prove ourselves to such a degree because of things we've had to navigate that sometimes that has worked not in our favor. That's worked against us because now we're trying to show so much depth and so many things. I didn't ask for all that. I didn't ask for all that. This is where we're trying to get. And I think that's a big component that entrepreneurs wanting to learn. But two, the other thing I want to tap in really quick on, you have, and again, I think most people know by now that me and Christina are extroverts, and people may not know I used to be an introvert. For those who know me back in the day, I did. I went to the other team. I got, they traded a few draft picks for me. But people don't really know this. Like I was pretty bad. But what I want people to understand, and Jimmy, you expressed it so well, so I'm going to try to balance it. People have this notion that you either going to be an extrovert or you're going to be an introvert. And sometimes they may say you may be an ambivert to be a certain type of leader or be successful in business. It's just a transfer of energy. If you can still, like you said, you have your certain structure to convey a certain way to make someone feel a certain thing, that's all that matters. You may not have to, swag and sway. If you can control how you convey to make someone feel a certain way to connect, to convert, it's all that matters. Whether you running on diesel, or you running on electric, or you run on gas, get me to the destination. That's all I care about at the end of the day. And so if you are an introvert, you might have never thought Jimmy was an introvert by the way he's presented himself and carried himself. And at the same time, you may never thought I used to be one, but conveying myself and anything. And it's not a matter of I got to be this, I got to be that. I will say this. You have to be what's necessary to be and where you want to go. And I don't think businesses, when they start, they don't do enough introspection to figure out, well, who do I need to become? Doesn't mean you're losing who you were. You're adding on those layers to be better, more efficient. And Jimmy, when you were talking about time efficient, I said, oh, Lord, you found me. I'm trying to be better. And we're so worried about we need more clients. We had someone who was on the show talking about, how about I just reduce my costs? If I reduce my costs enough, it's going to feel like I gained a client. Mm-hmm. How much are we wasting? Time, energy, money. And that leaves, a lasting impact. So Jimmy, when you're looking at, pursuing these bigger deals, like when you look at your schedule and your time, how do you modify that to prepare yourself for the bigger deals?
Yeah. And we did a training last year on this time blocking, time batching, task batching, and the other one, it says 3 of them. And at the end of the day, it's a combination of understanding where you are, where you've been, and where you're going. And so I have blocks of time that are non-negotiable in regards to things that have to happen every single week. And then I have time blocked out for, to do prospecting. I have time blocked out to just read, and I it can be difficult for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when you're taking care of family. I have my daughter. She's old enough where she can do her own thing. I am a single dad in that aspect, so I do have more time to play with. But some dads are probably going to go and jump on their boats and all this other stuff if they have one. I don't have a boat, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. But I derive my passion from creating content, and that content just happens to actually be also my work. So I spend a lot of time there. So it allows now I follow this thing called the $10,000 an hour strategy. And I learned this from a guy named Perry Marshall, and I even have it printed on my wall. $10 an hour work, $100 an hour work, $1,000 an hour work, and $10,000 an hour work. And the objective is to migrate over to only doing $10,000 an hour stuff as the leader of your organization. And the more you can play in that category, the payoff is usually a long-term scenario, which kind of balances out with the $10,000. Of course, no one's cutting you a check for $10,000 an hour, but once you start to operate in that area, it changes your how you're able to get things done. A $10,000 an hour thing is speaking on stage. Instead of trying to do one-offs and cold calling, you're speaking in front of a room of 1,000 people, and 9 of them are excited and 5 of them become clients. Why? Because the message is so locked in and so structured that if they're talking to you, it's not necessarily who are you, it's does it come in red or green. And so you're having better conversations. You're focused on big picture thinking. You're thinking about how does this align with our vision, our values, the focus areas we have to focus on for the year, your strategy, in essence. And now you're when someone comes to you with an amazing idea or a concept, which they will, as great as it may sound, you go, no. And they're like, how can you say no? Because for me to do that, something else has to come off my plate. And if something comes off my plate, then it takes me further away from the vision that we've set for this organization, because this doesn't align. It's cool and all. I'll give you an example. I was trying to, at the time, I wanted to do a TEDx talk. So I still haven't done it yet. But look, think me and my daughter calls it big brain. All of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do a TED talk. I want to run a TED structure. So I went and studied the whole thing, and I wanted to do TEDx New York City. I don't think small. I'm just like, I wanted, and it was a lot of back and forth. And then they were like, then they declined it because they were like, are you going to be too promotional with it? I go, no. I'm just trying to tell you what I do and how I support small businesses. I understand we're not supposed to promote. We're supposed to support, But then after a while, I realized this has nothing to do with the vision of my organization. This is Jimmy Newson. And so I paused it. I go, because it was taking up too much time, and it was really for my ego. And I had to put myself in check and got that time back and applied it where it was supposed to be applied. Yeah.
Ooh.
I feel like that is so good for people to hear, in the sense of your honesty in that, because people think that even introvert or extrovert, they wouldn't be able to get on a stage and speak. It's like finding what your $10,000 an hour thing is. And even it could be like a managing up type of situation. If you see that your boss would be great at that, kind of push them that way, because them being successful in that will help you be successful. If you're BDR, SDR, AE, market, whatever you are, it will help down the line. And being a leader to know that, or a growing leader to know that, is super important.
Mm-hmm. And I have no problem at all being vulnerable. And I think that is what most of us as leaders struggle to do, or decide that they don't really want to do. I would tell you, I fell flat on my face, and it hurt, and it hurt bad, because I'm not perfect, and I'm still and I have more mistakes to make, but that's part of the process. If you're not making the mistakes, you're not learning, you're not growing, and you're not paying tuition.
I think really quick, one, when you're talking about, sitting with that ego, how many times have people made decisions on the business decisions off of ego? Absolutely. And not realizing it's not working? You got to pivot, you got to shift, or you better find a specialist to help you. You better navigate a certain way. This market is rough. Switch it up, do something different. And how far is that line of like, I got to break through and prove them wrong, versus, listen, this ain't it. Try again. And I think people have a hard time navigating that line. The other thing I'd say, and I appreciate your vulnerability, Jim. I remember we were just talking a few weeks back, and I didn't want to say it, but sometimes it's important for the community. We had a potential chance to get this big client. I've been working hard. We've put it all together, leading us on. And you're thinking the wait's good, like, it's about to close. And then they give you the most basic of answer as to why. And you got to, especially maybe other people can, but underrepresented times when we got to play it cool and be like, oh, we understand. Mm-hmm. But once you send that email or end of that click, he was just like, and just all those things. And we had a call after, and it was supposed to be, Jim, and I'm in a negative funk. And he can sense that. And he was saying something. And then he's like, I was kind of dealing with something too. I navigated some similar challenges myself. And it's not that you trying to compare buckets. I think we think in our own mind, we're the only people on this planet who are navigating these specific challenges. And we're looking at social, we're looking at everything that they're doing. I'm like, Jimmy just got done speaking with Sim Rush and all this stuff. I'm like, his life is golden. Not realizing behind the scenes, yeah, I did that to bring awareness to get new pipeline because this didn't close. Mm-hmm. And so I think, Jimmy, I appreciate you. I appreciate you too, Christina. Well, we do this every day. But I appreciate you both for sharing that vulnerability. But my point in this, Jimmy, how much is too much vulnerability in your circles? Well, how do you know when you've given too much away?
And when we say how much we're giving too much away, as far as of our personal
when you're sharing
life
versus like it comes across that maybe you're complaining or
absolutely,
it's not serving a purpose to help you in the long term.
Well, that's the key. It has to serve a purpose. Everything, I'm purposeful about everything I do and share. I don't like to complain. So I consider that I do not like complaining and complainers. That doesn't mean you can't. There's a time and place for that. But in most of my conversation with you, that's usually not it, But here's an example of not necessarily complaining, but, and I learned this from another a mentor. If you're not liking something and you need to air it out, come back, bring with that another alternative solution. Don't just complain about something and then don't have anything to contribute to, well, how would you fix it? What would you do differently? What would you do next? And that's how I'll look at something. I'll go, so I learned from that. Here's what I would suggest we do. Here's where we can possibly go with that. So complaining, I'm not trying to rag on it. There is a place for it, but it's how do you leverage it? How do you use it? And still get a positive out of the situation, so it doesn't seem like you're complaining, but you're being constructive about something. Maybe, Christina.
No, I think that's super important because I feel at times I feel like some people I complain quote unquote more to, and then there are others that I filter or mask per se. But it's finding that fine line, especially when it comes to connecting with your customers, creating that vulnerable space so they can be able to feel confident that they're being able to be vulnerable. Like with Troy, him and I shouldn't say we complain, not like
we confide.
Yeah, I was gonna say a word that probably had to be bleep out, but yeah, we confide. Yeah, exactly. I was like, I don't know if we're allowed to do that here. But with him, with Troy, I sometimes am like cognizant of the sense of like, yo, CK, like you're being kind of negative right now and complaining a little bit too much. Like, let's rein it back, because I know Troy in the sense of he's an empath and he can feel a lot of things of others and not just what he's going through. So I don't want to like put that on him. And I've already done that in the past couple of months because life's been nuts though. But it's also a two-way street with that, So I feel like it's where people need to be. And now this like makes you go down a rabbit hole, which I'm not going to let my ADHD fully commit to this, but this is why sometimes on LinkedIn, I get so aggravated because some people choose different platforms to literally just complain, or they use something to create a, hey, look at me aspect when they're trying to be connective and they're trying to be that way. But there's ways to do it, and there's definitely ways to not do it. And that also comes to not even LinkedIn. It's like someone on Instagram when you're scrolling and someone was like, oh, I don't like the shirt you're wearing. Cool. Like we need to unpack that because you're obviously going through something. You don't know me, So it's like it's being complaining in the aspect of also like thumb complaining is a lot different than mouth complaining, and people need to recognize that.
Yeah.
I feel like the truth of the matter. There are seasons where if you in the right group and you can feel a safe space, I'd rather you air that out, and then hey, we're gonna have a frame. And once it's out, you're gonna turn that switch off, leave it there, and now let's do solution oriented. I think
Mhm.
you have to balance between being a listener, being a pusher, and then being a guide.
Mhm.
At the same time, emotional regulation as entrepreneurs is critical.
Absolutely.
We might have some vices. We may not even be cognizant that our pain or our feelings and emotions is emitting and impacting our work, impacting our flow. We may not even be aware of it. And that's when you have the right community around you, that inner circle, but you seem off today. And we then shouldn't always be defensive, like, how you know my tea? What's going on? I know you, something's off. And if you need someone to vent, leave it there, and come back as yourself, we all need that. Because ain't no entrepreneur making millions of dollars on their own, by their own power, by their own, oh, I'm going to just, meditate, work out, drink water, and poof, the money is going to come. You need people to be like, this is here, this is what's happening. I think that's a critical component of that.
Yeah, and it's at the end of the day, when you asked, how much is too much to share, it's really on a case by case basis, understanding the people that you're connected with, the people you're around, and where you should go, and you should always err on the side of caution, not to, you know, again, when you mentioned social media, Christina, I very seldom ever get triggered. I don't think I've ever even used that word before in a sentence, but I've heard it a lot. But I'm not sure what happened to me, but it probably was a call or something. And so I went to go to, and I wanted to just say, people stop doing that. Not to them, but just in general. But then it ended up turning into an educational post. So I had time to craft it and this and that. And it was probably one of my most interactive posts. And it was actually around time management. Now that I remember, and a colleague of mine goes, wow, that was a great post. So what was the motivation? I go, it was actually triggered. But by the time I got done writing it, it turned in more of a inspirational thing to support small businesses around time management. And so you can redirect that, again, coming back with a solution or a way to leverage that anger inside you, or that negative energy, and make a positive out of it.
I love that your like trigger turned into that teaching moment, not for like just yourself, but others. And what I do when I feel triggered, and then we're going to wrap up with this, and I'm going to ask you a final question. You say that you love old school hip hop. I love music, and that helps me not be triggered. So what's your go-to? What are you listening to? What's on like if you have a, I almost said iPad. Oh my gosh. If you have like on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever you listen to, what's your go-to listening jam right now, and who's always going to be the OG to you?
Oh man, it ranges between early 2000 and back. That's it.
Okay.
So it
Okay.
starts
I
there.
respect that.
If it's real old school, it's EPMD, it's Eric B and Rakim, it's Big Daddy Kane. If it's in the 90s, is Busta Rhymes, it's Tribe Called Quest, it's Poor Righteous Teachers. Oh, don't get I could hear it right now. And then Far Side. And then if it's 2000s, of course, you got Biggie, you got I can't even think, the 2000s, they're in a little bit of trouble right now.
I was going to say,
so
that could be a whole other
I can't even go there, but
I almost asked a question on that, and I was like, Christina, we don't have time. We don't have time.
We're talking Kendrick, Jermaine Cole, Drake. They have a beef that's not a beef. We're not going to talk about that this time. But
so I'm an old schooler. I like my old school. So when it comes to hip hop, that I'm pretty much living, I guess, mostly in the late 80s, all through the 90s.
Awesome. I love it.
What song is like your go-to, I need a reset song?
Oh, I don't have one. I just have certain artists just have certain songs. I went through a breakup a few years ago. So it was really Faith Evans. I have you get no love from me. So I do my walk and I'm like,
yeah.
And I was just like, I got back to my office. I was like, yeah, now we can get back to work.
Yeah.
I hope that part needs to be the intro of just the whole thing. Just like that segment, just right into it. I love it. I love it.
Yes, I love that. Music therapy is a thing.
It is.
For
It is.
sure.
And it was a while where I wasn't listening to music, and I had my Alexa now, and I'm like, why am I not playing music at certain times of the day when I'm working?
Mm-hmm. I love it. So if we were to add one song to the season 3 media not podcast, the playlist, what song would you have us add?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Paid in Full, FB and Rakim.
Perfect. I love that. That's manifesting too. So
There you go. That's
why
I chose it.
Show me the money.
Thinking of a
please.
master plan.
love it.
Oops.
Oh, what happened?
Maybe a producer wanted to add a
I
song
was literally
too.
about to say thank you for having your song. I'm like, bro, moving too slow. I'm sorry. All right, let me reset. Oh my goodness. Well, Jimmy, we covered a lot of different things, from hip hop to growth to small business to being an introvert versus an extrovert, our monikers, all those things. And we appreciate your impact, no pun intended. We appreciate your gracefulness, your in-depthness. I know if people want to learn more about Jimmy, you can go to movingforwardsmallbusiness.com. There's a lot of information there. They connect with you on LinkedIn. They can go see your podcasts. They can go book you for stages. What is there anything else I'm forgetting that you want people to know about in this moment?
No, just at the end of the day, we have to build a relationship one step at a time, one brick at a time. So connecting with me on LinkedIn is my favorite platform as far as social media. And if you go to the website, you start your journey there. And from there, you contact me and we start a relationship.
And maybe they want to get in good graces, send you a message with their favorite 80s hip hop song to know you not a bot.
Oh, yeah, they could do that too.
I love that. Extra points if you wrap it to them in a video message. Okay.
Absolutely. I learned quite a few songs during all those parties.
I am sure.
And that wraps up another episode of Unfiltered Growth. Make sure you subscribe, rate,
with 5 stars,
and leave us a review.
Remember, growth doesn't happen in isolation. Join our community of bold thinkers and doers on social media and stay connected.
Don't forget to go to season3media.com/podcast for strategy or event inquiries, resources, or to just chill with us.
Until next time, keep pushing boundaries, embracing diversity, and never stop growing. This is Christina and Troy signing off. And remember,
no filters,
just growth.